went on as planned, but the meeting on the war in Yemen has hit a snag. Houthi rebels haven't yet managed to fly to the Swiss city of Geneva for negotiations with representatives of the Yemeni government. The UN's special envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, is already there, and he says he's discussed issues including prisoners and humanitarian access with Yemen's foreign minister. Here is more from Geneva with David Chater.
The UN Special Envoy for Yemen is still holding out hope that these consultation talks can start. But he doesn't know exactly when. It could be Saturday, it could be Sunday, it could even be Monday. But he's still holding out hope. The question is, though, exactly how long can the Yemen government delegation sitting on their own here at this hotel in Geneva, how long can they actually wait? When will their patience run out? Still on the ground in Sana'a, the Yemen capital, is the Houthi rebel delegation. They're demanding the chance to put injured fighters on their plane for treatment in the Omani capital of Muscat. But the Yemeni government spokesman here told me that it's not only the injured fighters that they're trying to get on that plane. Let's hear what he said.
They said yesterday that they want to departure injured from Yemen. We have information from our side from Sana'a, that those are not injured. They are a group of Iranian and or group of Hezbollah experts who were developing ballistic missiles program that has been fired to Saudi Arabia, and they are training Houthi. They have been training Houthi for the last 3 years.
It's been described by the United Nations as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. More than 10,000 people have died, 2,000 or so have been children. Every day these peace consultations are delayed means more lives are put at risk.
Well, talks about Yemen have had a long and unsuccessful history, unfortunately. In fact, just as an experiment, I typed in Yemen talks in the search bar at aljazeera.com. Now, a whole lot of stuff comes up, but it's the dates that you've got to look at. So the top story is about what's happening at the moment, but inside story from 2015, Yemen talks, useful start or doomed to fail. Analysis, where are Yemen talks stalling? That was 2014. 2015, Yemen peace deal elusive, but rivals vow to meet again. And it goes on and on and on. These talks have been unsuccessful. In fact, the first round of UN-led peace talks was meant to be held in Geneva in June of 2015, 3 months after the Saudi-led coalition intervened in the conflict. But that meeting collapsed after Yemen's government in exile accused the Houthi representatives of refusing to turn up. Later that year, the UN managed to get the warring parties around the same negotiating table for 6 days. They agreed a mass prisoners swap, but no other major breakthrough, and fighting on the ground carried on. Fast forward to April 2016, and that was the last time they met. It was in Kuwait, but the UN-brokered talks collapsed after they failed to reach a power-sharing agreement following 108 days of negotiations. It's not gone well. We're going to talk to Amanda Catanzano about it now, Senior Director of the International Program's Policy and Advocacy at the International Rescue Group. Nice to have you with us. Short story, what's gone wrong? I mean, is it just because it's a complicated war? And like we see in Syria, trying to get sides to agree on one thing, let alone trying to end a war, is actually very difficult.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kamal. I think that's true. I think that it is a complicated war, and it's only become more complicated since 2015. And I think peace talks in the past have broken down for a number of reasons, one of them being that they were very elite talks. They didn't include a lot of the voices that are most affected by the war, whether that's women or young Yemenis. They weren't seen as inclusive and they weren't seen as representative. I think we also have to keep in mind that the peace process framework that these talks have been based on is a UN Security Council resolution from 2015. In a lot of ways, it's a relic of a different war. And it has not just been insufficient to get parties to the table, it's been counterproductive in a lot of ways, and has really entrenched the positions. And then I think finally, until the parties really abandon hopes of winning this militarily, it's been difficult to get them to commit seriously to a peace process. That said, I think Martin Griffiths' efforts have been nothing short of heroic, and the idea that these parties were going to come to the table this week is the most positive step we've seen in over 3 years. And so I think we all have to hope that this can still get off the ground. The stakes are very high. August was the most violent month that we've seen all year in Yemen. The International Rescue Committee has 400 staff all over the country, and we've seen the impact that that's had, not just throughout the year, but specifically in the end of July and the month of August. So the stakes are as high as they've ever been.
You talked about the way the war has changed. I assume you're referring to the fact that the Saudis and the Emiratis intervened and became arguably the central part of this war. Should they be involved in the talks somehow?
Well, I think eventually that's the path that the special envoy wants to take. I think there is some merit in bringing together the initial parties to the conflict for the first consultations. These seem to be described more as talks about talks, and I think there is a pathway to bring these other parties into the conversation, these absolute necessary parts. But I think we've seen this war both splinter. There's more parties to the conflict than there have been. So it's not exclusively about the Saudi and the Emirati-led coalition's involvement, but also sort of splits within authorities in the south and the STC becoming more of a voice. So it's sort of devolved into a series of local conflicts as well as evolved into a regional and geopolitical one simultaneously. So yes, and that gets back to your first point. This is very complicated.
Yeah. Would it be more effective to try, and maybe it's a separate effort, separate of these talks, try and get a ceasefire first? At least stop the attacks, stop the air raids, stop the killing, sort things out on that level, and then try to get peace.
I think that we argue absolutely yes. I think the humanitarian community feels very strongly that there should be a call and a demand in all leverage on the parties to the conflict to come to that, at least a temporary ceasefire. The violence of the last month, the airstrikes that we've seen spike a bit in Hodeidah over the last week, they threaten to get any sort of consultation to cut it off at the knees before it even starts. And so I think as a first order priority, the pressure should be ratcheted up around a ceasefire, not just so that it can bring the parties to the table, but also because the people of Yemen cannot wait. This is going to be a long road to peace, even in the best circumstances, and time is one thing that the Yemeni people do not have. They've suffered for too long, so there's also the need to stop the violence, to stop the suffering of ordinary Yemenis who've been caught in this for over 3 years.
Amanda Catanzano joining us from Washington, talking Yemen. Thank you very much for your time. Now, Kosovo's president is meeting his Serbian counterpart